In roughly 3.5 years, we had 1,100 years of storms. There's a problem.
I don't want to study global warming rising tides. I'm not interested in studying it. It's a fact. It's happening. We need actual actions.
So what to do when the water rises?
It can be a floating harbor, it can be a floating parking, it can be floating offices, floating green.
Without these projects, the roads and the houses would be washing away.
I'm Anne-Marie McDonald. DocZone has... It was as if a water bomb smashed onto southern Alberta. A massive weather system trapped by unusual wind patterns exploded into 3 days of torrential rain.
The Bow River looks like an ocean at the moment.
At least a dozen communities have declared states of emergency.
The storm hit after a cooler than usual spring, so the snowpack was still melting. The record-breaking deluge crashed onto ground that was already saturated.
This is High River. Nearly the entire town is under. Business is destroyed. Like Calgary, there was very little warning and almost no preparation here, leaving homes completely exposed.
75,000 people were evacuated from the flood zone. All schools were closed, and the business district was inaccessible for almost a week. Welcome to the new normal. Across Canada, climate change is causing extreme and extraordinary weather. Warmer temperatures can produce more violent weather patterns because there's more water vapor in the atmosphere, 7% more for every degree of temperature rise.
And when that water then condenses, gives off all that energy, and that energy whips up the storms.
By the year 2050, just 35 years from now, Canada can expect double the number of extremely heavy precipitation events, with periods of drought in between. 5 times as many hot days over 30 degrees, 100% increase in wildfires, 50% less snowfall across the prairies, more hail, 50% more ice storms, and more intense hurricanes.
We're probably 1 or 2 major catastrophic events away from really bringing cities on board across the country to realize how dire the situation is that we are currently in.
Catastrophic events, mostly weather, cost Canada roughly $1 billion each year from 2010 to 2012. In 2013, it shot up to $8 billion, and costs will rise with the Earth's temperature. Around the world, the buzzword is adaptation, as cities and citizens scramble to get ready for wild weather resulting from climate change. In New York, they're erecting a system of barriers to protect the city from Atlantic storms.
Rebuilding stronger and more resilient for the types of climate change risks that we are facing.
And restocking the harbor with oysters to slow storm surge.
We want to create a kind of a system of preparedness.
In the Netherlands, entire housing complexes are being designed to float. In Toronto, they're rushing to replace aging infrastructure in the most vulnerable neighborhoods.
Until they actually do the infrastructure repair, we're kind of sitting ducks.
In Calgary, everything's changing. Single home building practices, giant water diversion projects, and in some cases, retreat.
In the long run, we need to step back from the water, really.
So the trick is, how do we get ahead of the curve so we just don't simply have a management by disaster scenario?
Blair Feltmate, University of Waterloo professor and concerned family man, is chair of Canada's Climate Change Adaptation Project. Its goal, find practical, cost-effective ways to lessen the impact of climate change.
It's mission critical for the country. We have to weather harden the system. Climate change will continue to happen. We need to figure out, well, what are we going to do about it?
After the floods of 2013, Albertans were suddenly thrust headfirst into climate change adaptation. Even though she just bought a house only a block from the Elbow River in Calgary, Jocelyn Rempel didn't expect to ever be flooded out, since her partner had done his homework before they purchased.
He actually looked at the previous flood fringe and the floodway, and it's never flooded in this area in the 100 years that it's been built. It was built in 1911.
But in the great June 2013 flood, their house was in the way of the now mighty Elbow River, pummeling debris against their home.
It was coming on strong from the river, and for 2 days straight, it just came pounding towards the house.
It was 3 days before Jocelyn could finally get back into her home.
It was devastating. I mean, everything was everywhere. It was just muddy and dirty.
Jocelyn and her partner caught a lucky break. An architect saw her on the news and volunteered to design a new flood-proof house.
He put the mechanical room up on the top floor, so that way if, another flood were to come, then we're not going to have the furnace, the hot water heater, the electrical panel. We're not going to have that in the basement.
Now they have to figure out how to pay for it all.
We didn't get coverage from insurance. They considered it overland flooding, so as you know, Canada doesn't cover that.
Unlike the US, in Canada, you can't generally buy flood insurance for water that comes into the house overland, through doors and windows, as opposed to up from the sewer pipes. It isn't a sinister plot on the part of insurance companies. There simply wasn't a market for it here. Until now. Of the $6 billion cleanup bill from the Alberta floods, only $1.7 billion was insured, leaving the rest for property owners and governments. No surprise, suddenly in Calgary, building better is in vogue, and master builder Murray Pound is in demand.
We're seeing more and more water in Alberta, and so we have to create strategies to deal with that. Very small details can cause a lot of damage. And if those little details aren't done correctly, it can be catastrophic.
Murray is full of practical advice for homeowners. Proper window flashing and correctly installed drain spouts. Water alarms, check valves, sump pumps, and the all-important backwater valve. In an existing home, backwater valves can be expensive to install. But in flood-prone areas, they still cost less than the flood damage.
Without that protection, there's really nothing disconnecting you from the sewer and into your basement. I get it. It's not sexy. It's not granite. It's not hardwood flooring. It's not a fireplace. I understand that. But if we don't do that, you know that sewage water in your basement's not sexy either.
To keep water away from homes in the first place, the City of Calgary and the province are developing projects to divert water and save it to be used later during droughts.
This one has a bigger catchment area, so it'll be more effective.
One mega project diverts water upstream, far from any towns, to a lake where it can be released later at a controlled rate. Another project diverts overflow from the Glenmore Reservoir so it flows safely under Calgary and into the Bow River. They're large-scale, expensive projects, but they'll almost certainly be needed as the weather gets wilder.
It would be foolhardy not to put the money into adaptation because that kind of flood will happen again and again in the coming climate.
Gordon McBain knows as much as or more about climate change than any person on Earth. As the first Canadian to head the International Council for Science in over 40 years, McBain's mission is to lead us toward policies that both slow climate change and help us adapt to what's already underway.
If we don't do something about reducing our vulnerability and exposure, we are going to see very large economic, but even more importantly, social, cultural, health effects on Canadians and people around the world.
But spending money on climate change adaptation is often a problem for governments, since the future benefit won't be obvious to voters unless they've already lived through a disaster. Yet even conservative estimates say that for every dollar spent now on adaptation, 6 will be saved when wild weather does strike.
I think we can adapt to many of these things by redesigning of our own homes, redesigning of our municipal infrastructures, but in some cases the necessity will be to withdraw.
After 2013, retreat was one of Alberta's major climate change adaptations. People living on floodways like the Wallaceville neighborhood of High River never went home again.
We made the very difficult decision to purchase all of the homes in Wallaceville and return that area to the river, essentially.
We almost have to weigh these things on an individual basis. But at the end of the day, people can't pretend the problem doesn't exist. If you try to cheat it, you'll get caught, and you'll get caught in the form of flooding.
On the lower lakes, it may stretch out more, and there might be more isolated showers, but this is definitely solid.
At Ontario's Environment Canada Prediction Centre, they continuously gather information from hundreds of observation sites around the province, trying to stay one step ahead of the storm.
The crux of our job is really providing Canadians with as much lead time as possible for severe storms.
But some weather systems give little warning.
For severe thunderstorms, maybe only 25 or 30 minutes advance notice. As we go forward in the coming decades, we're looking at longer periods of drought in the spring and summer, punctuated by heavy rainfalls. If Toronto normally got about 75 millimeters of rain in the month of July, we may still get 75 millimeters of rain, but it may all happen in one day.
Actually, that's already happened, and then some. On July 8, 2013, when 2 major thunderstorms collided over Toronto, dumping a record-breaking 126 millimeters of water, creating flash flooding and chaos. It was all made so much worse by the city's sea of concrete. Unable to be absorbed, the rainwater rushed through the streets. Ultimately, the storm would cost Toronto just under $1 billion. It wasn't the first disastrous flood to hit Toronto. They'd already had their storm of the century in 1954, when Hurricane Hazel swept through southern Ontario.
With rainfall reaching almost 7 inches in places, some rivers ran as much as 16 feet above their normal level.
An entire street was wiped out as the Humber River cut a new and permanent course.
More than 40 highways and main roads are underwater.
Hazel woke Ontario up. The province formed conservation authorities to manage watersheds.
One of the things they did is they built dam structures on major watercourses throughout the province. During high rain events, water can be held back and discharged over longer periods of time.
Water levels are now constantly monitored.
Okay.
Remote sensing devices measure water volume. After Hurricane Hazel, along the Dawn and Humber waterways, the city simply expropriated houses, leaving room for the river to flood. Today, where the Humber River took out a whole neighborhood, there's a park and a reminder of how high the river can get. So Canada's largest city had already taken drastic measures to manage waterways. But in the 2013 storm, over 99% of the homes flooded were not in any of the predicted flood zones. More people, more concrete, more storms. Our city's aging drains and sewers just can't keep up.
This past year was like the mother lode. It was just crazy.
Bev Silva's North York neighborhood, miles from any river, had 3 floods in 1 year due to a chronic problem with sewers backing up.
Nobody could predict it, and nobody was prepared for it, and they were in shock.
The water level was actually, if I can just show you, was actually about this high.
So we've done it 3 times now since May. And on the end of it, The wife and I, we heard the fridge tipping over, and I looked down, I said, "Hon, the fridge is floating around." She says, "Get the whiskey."
After 3 flood claims, Bev Silva's insurance was canceled. She decided to get out before the next one.
So how high was your water when it...
I'd say about right here.
I can't live with the thought of it happening again and not having the proper coverage. So I've put my house up for sale.
Even though she disclosed the flooding, in Toronto's hot real estate market, Bev was actually able to sell her home quickly.
What a good boy.
Bev's neighbors hang on for now, still waiting for the city to upgrade drainage systems. Staying ahead of the storms is further complicated by Toronto's phenomenal growth. Infrastructure upgrading, including electrical systems, just hasn't kept up.
Toronto only has a couple of feeder lines to bring electricity into the city, and if one of them gets knocked out, which happened in 2013, you can end up with half the city without electricity supply.
With Toronto booming, there are now 250,000 condo units just in the downtown core. Imagine being on the 35th floor on a hot summer day when a flash flood takes out the power grid. No elevators, no fridge, no air conditioning. A modern city meets aging infrastructure. Across the entire country, electrical upgrades must include much stronger lines to withstand ice storms. And equipment in underground vaults needs to be sealed against flooding. It's an expensive undertaking.
I would expect it's going to be more than $350 billion, but to have a resilient, reliable system you can count on is worth it, because one thing people really value is that the lights go on when you flip the switch.
But when the skies open up, it's not only building better that will save the day. The best prepared cities are also learning to unbuild, replacing concrete with more permeable materials so water can be absorbed. Preserving or rebuilding natural wetlands, as Toronto is doing with various river and stream restoration projects.
Just maintaining the natural ecology along the banks of river courses and leaving them with their natural meandering type flow in and of itself is a very, very effective means of mitigating potential flood events.
Effective in times of heavy rainfall, not quite enough when the storm coming at you is a hurricane. When we return, after Sandy, New York got serious about weatherproofing, from storm surge barriers and dikes to breeding oysters to save the city.
The goal by 2030 is to bring 1 billion oysters back to the New York Harbor.
When Hurricane Sandy hit New York City in October of 2012, it was a startling wake-up call.
8 million people, a record, are without power.
It wasn't that New York was totally unprepared for climate change. They've had a plan in place since 2007. But Sandy still caught them off guard. The largest Atlantic hurricane in history had weakened considerably before it hit the Big Apple. But the storm surge came during a very high tide and flooded some of the most populous and expensive real estate on the continent. $19 billion of damage to New York City alone. Most of the city's 44 deaths were people who drowned in the storm surge. The little community of Ocean Breeze on Staten Island was hit hard since there was nothing between it and 14 feet of rushing water. The big guy you see out the window in the raging waters is Frank Mazinski trying to rescue someone during the storm surge. Frank is a newcomer to the Ocean Breeze neighborhood. Only been here 43 years.
For us here in Ocean Breeze, not that I would have been able to get here for a few days, but this would have been our water level right here.
Ocean Breeze residents are faced with a tough choice. Either build back better or retreat.
I've been told by a geologist this storm was the 1 in 700 year storm. Irene before, technically, a 1 in 300 year storm. Spring floods the year before that, 1 in 100 years. So in roughly 3.5 years, we had 1,100 years of storms. There's a problem.
The community could be eligible for government buyouts, but not everybody wants to go.
I came here when I was 4 months old, and I'm 82. So I've been here ever since.
Mary had heard storm warnings before, so as Sandy approached, she simply decided to weather it out upstairs.
And when I looked over the steps, the water is coming up higher and higher and higher, and my things in the kitchen are floating all over the place. So I went back upstairs and I have a portable radio, and I went to sleep. So what else could I do?
6 generations of Mary's family have lived in Ocean Breeze. Her grandson is just next door, so Mary's staying put, even if she can no longer get flood insurance.
This is my home. You can't, unless you drag me out, you ain't gonna get me out of here.
Since Sandy, New York has updated its floodplain map.
We now have almost 400,000 people living in the floodplain in New York City, which is more than any other city in the United States by the number of people.
Climate change modeling for 2050 doesn't improve the picture. With sea level rise, increasingly intense storm surges threaten to engulf even more of the city. And by the turn of the century, the picture is shocking. Still, deserting the Big Apple is unimaginable to New Yorkers.
Retreat is not really a great option. There's too many people living in the floodplain in this city, and 2, we think we can make the right investments to reduce that risk to a manageable level.
But it won't be cheap. Every building in New York City needs to rethink its relationship with water. The Whitney, New York's world-famous Museum of American Art, had already started construction at a new location on the Hudson River before Hurricane Sandy.
We always knew we were in floodplain. We would build this at the 500-year flood mark, which was higher than actually almost anything in the neighborhood.
But when Sandy hit, the construction site was swamped. So director Adam Weinberg and his team redesigned the building to withstand wilder weather than they had ever imagined.
So this whole wall is waterproof.
Since they're protecting important American art, they had to go big. Go big or go under.
Any point of vulnerability renders any million-dollar system that you have completely futile.
The new, hopefully storm-proof Whitney includes watertight gates like those in a submarine. The overall site raised 16.5 feet above the Hudson River. And a waterproof wall between the Whitney and future storm surges.
It's a little bit like the Russian doll. To keep that one piece of art safe, you have to keep the gallery safe. To keep the gallery safe, you have to keep the building safe. To keep the building safe, you got to keep the perimeter safe.
There's a catch. Since they want the museum to be welcoming, the bunker-like perimeter wall only goes up if there's a major storm on the way. So they're betting on getting enough warning.
We are anticipating it will take 20 people 10 hours to deploy.
With $20 million spent just on stormproofing, the Whitney has become the poster child for how to do it right.
We're very proud that we were on the cutting edge of this, not something we had planned. We planned to be on the cutting edge of green museums, but we never expected to be on the cutting edge of flood.
Now, projects in the works throughout the greater New York area aim to be on the cutting edge of climate change adaptation. Starting with barriers to slow storm surge, a series of dikes, berms, and parks. And huge, ultra-fortified developments like this one, deliberately built on the water's edge, forming part of a protective U around Lower Manhattan's dense population and all-important financial center. But not all New York's plans are so monumental.
Resiliency will fail if it's just about building more walls. We need to build it into the city's entire way of thinking about how we address threats.
So Kate Orff's approach is right on target. An urban landscape architect, she's all about granular resilience.
This is the storm surge just before Sandy.
Basically building protection in small local pieces that, taken together, can save the city.
How I like to think about it is sort of layering up systems that can absorb the effects of climate change in different ways.
Kate is designing a living breakwater to create a protective necklace around exposed Staten Island. The intention? Slow storm surges.
That breakwater system can be combined with onshore strategies such as lifting buildings up, taking your power up and putting up at upper levels. So the city might flood, but it won't be catastrophic.
Her secret ingredient? Oysters. Kate is working with New York Harbor School to grow the oysters, which will eventually form reefs to protect the city. Oysters are a part of New York history, for centuries forming desirable barrier reefs before too many diners and too much pollution did them in.
The goal by 2030 is to bring 1 billion oysters back to New York Harbor.
We want to begin to connect people back to that environment. Oysters can't save New York, but people can save New York.
And we do all need saving. The world scientists agree that the Earth's temperature is rising fast.
Overall, we're up about 1 degree Celsius in the last 100 years, plus or minus a bit. Now, that might not sound like too much, but you have to remember that the difference between the Ice Age and today is 5 degrees Celsius.
So it took 10,000 years for the Earth's temperature to rise 5 degrees. But it took only a century to go up another degree. And 3 more degrees are expected by the turn of this century. That means the oceans are getting hotter too, causing them to expand. Add in the melting ice pack, and all that water is rising along our coastlines. Every community built along the ocean is living on borrowed time. But in South Florida, that time is rapidly running out. Barely above sea level and built on porous limestone, South Florida is on the brink of catastrophe.
When they built those houses, they put them right on the ground. No one ever thought the ocean would come up and swallow them up. But guess what?
Dan Kipnis has lived on the water his whole life, made his living as a fishing guide.
The spotted sea trout. We'll just let him go. Go home, baby.
He's an eyewitness to what's happening along the Florida coast.
In my lifetime, I watched the barnacles go all the way up the pilings, which means the water was going up.
Even if we get greenhouse gas emissions under control soon, the eastern coast of North America can still expect at least a 1.5 foot sea level rise by 2050, permanently flooding much of low-lying South Florida. This water flooding Miami Beach's main street is from a very high tide on a calm, sunny day. Imagine the destruction if one of their many hurricanes were to hit when the sea is already so high. Miami Beach politicians are very aware of the urgency.
I don't want to study global warming rising tides. I'm not interested in studying it. It's a fact. It's happening. So to study it, to me, is more repetitive. It's not where we need to go. We need actual actions.
Like the $200 million they're about to spend on pumping stations.
30 years from now, Miami Beach will be a city protected by pumps. Many of the roads will have been raised, but it all depends upon how fast the water comes up. It's getting faster and faster and faster every year. When the salt water comes up too high, we lose the Everglades. When we lose the Everglades, we lose our drinking water, because all of our drinking water is in the aquifer that is the Everglades.
Towns are already losing their fresh water. Nearby Hallandale has lost 6 of their 8 drinking water wells. Yet condos are still going up. And tourists are still coming, mostly oblivious to the fact that the sand under their towels is rapidly vanishing. Rising seas keep washing the beaches away. And the Army Corps of Engineers keeps pumping in more sand to replace them. Possibly a little like throwing dollar bills into the ocean.
We get that all the time because people watch our projects wash away. But what they don't realize is that without these projects, the roads and the houses would be washing away.
But sand supplies won't last forever, and it's washing away faster and faster. Still, it's hard to face the fact that paradise could be truly lost.
I got my life in this place. It's incredible. I live in a paradise. What does it cost to get me out of here? I'll take my equity and leave because I can't fix this problem. I cannot fix this problem. Nobody can fix this problem in South Florida. Pessimistic? No. Realistic. Realistic.
Communities in South Florida will have to retreat. The question is, will it be relatively graceful or totally chaotic? Since there's no way of avoiding sea level rise, what about rising above it, or at least rising with it?
It can be a floating harbor, it can be floating parking, it can be floating offices, floating green.
When there's water everywhere, who are you going to call? The Dutch, of course. In the Netherlands, 20% of the land and 60% of the population is below sea level. As if that wasn't enough, many of Europe's rivers drain through this tiny country. No surprise, the Dutch are without doubt the world experts at living with water.
You have chosen a very good day to make these shots. The climate is changing. What we want to show here, that floating communities is a future for this city.
Rotterdam is 90% below sea level, so flooding is always an imminent threat. There's no wiggle room for storm surge or even rainwater.
This is a water plaza and it's collecting the rainfall from all the buildings in the surrounding of this area. When it's keep on raining like this and even more heavier, then this will be filled up slowly.
The Dutch have a well-stocked toolkit for dealing with water.
We not only develop the technologies, but we live in our own lab, in our own living lab below sea level.
Piet Dirk is with a Dutch engineering and design firm, exporting water management expertise worldwide.
Let's have lunch. Okay. How can you protect cities and people against the impacts of climate change, against flooding or against droughts?
Sometimes the protective measures must be giant-sized.
Well, what we're looking at right here is the Maaslandkering, or maybe more in better English, the Rotterdam storm surge barrier.
Built on one of the busiest shipping channels in the world, the barrier is only used when a big storm threatens. Then, two long steel arms, each almost the size of the Eiffel Tower, close together and drop down to the sea floor, interrupting the storm surge. It was last used in 2007 in anticipation of heavy North Sea flooding caused by a cyclone.
It resulted in no flooding at all, while in almost all our neighbor countries there were significant problems with the flood. So we were pretty happy with the result.
But engineering doesn't always stand the test of time. Historically, the Dutch reclaimed land by building dikes to hold back the water. But major flood evacuations in the mid-1990s sparked a radical change of direction.
By relocating the dikes inland, the floodplains will become broader.
The new government program is actually ripping down some dikes. Throughout Holland, they'll protect 4 million people by allowing planned flooding. They call it Room for the River. In this farm area, they moved barns and houses up onto mounds so floodwater can flow into the fields as needed to prevent damage upstream.
The family is safe, the cows are safe, the barn is safe. Dus let the water come.
There are now 34 Room for the River projects, many in urban areas like Nijmegen, the oldest city in the Netherlands where whole neighborhoods were expropriated. Drastic times call for drastic measures, and very creative ones.
We find flexibility on water, which we can't find on land, and safe. If there's a flood, we can go up and down with the water.
Architect Koen Olthius is designing a new water world. His nickname? The Floating Dutchman.
It can be a floating harbor, it can be a floating parking, it can be floating offices, floating green. Everything a city needs, you put on the water.
Just outside Rotterdam, Koen has designed a floating housing complex for an area scheduled to be flooded next year. But many of his clients are in places like Dubai, the Maldives, and Miami.
We don't know what will happen in 10 years, and 20 years, and 50 years, so you better be prepared and be flexible instead of only fighting it.
Many of Koen's designs aren't exactly affordable for the average person, but he's working on plans at the other end of the scale too, like this floating classroom, already in use in Manila, and coming soon to Uganda and Bangladesh.
The rich pay for the technology, and the poor can use it.
For much of the world, most of the attention right now is on flooding. But Weather Gone Wild brings not only wet weather, but dry. As the world warms, Canada will reap some benefit.
Corn is starting to make its way up into this country, which never used to be. If it continues on the rate it is, we will be growing more crops that we never ever could consider.
Smart farmers are adapting rapidly.
We concentrate on being flexible with the way we seed, the way we fertilize, and the choices of crops we make each year.
And on the Canadian prairies, they know wet weather one year doesn't mean there won't be drought the next.
We had a huge drought in 1999 to 2005. The costs of that were actually much larger than the cost of the Calgary flood, but it was spread out over a large number of people, a large area, and over several years. Those droughts will happen more often.
In 35 years, across our prairies, we can expect 50% less snowpack over the winter, which means less slow release of moisture throughout the growing season. Major droughts will be part of our future.
We pay pretty close attention to a drought anywhere.
Western Canadian farmers don't have to look far to see the effects of extreme drought. In California, 2013 was the driest year on record. That is, until 2014 came along. By summer's end, 60% of the state was enduring exceptional drought, the worst possible rating. Ranchers feel it first, since they often don't irrigate but wait for rain to water grazing land. No rain means livestock must be sold off.
At my home ranch, we had to sell over 60% of the cows this year to make it work.
This rangeland is actually a huge research facility where the University of California works with ranchers on drought adaptation. Which grasses to plant for drought resistance. High rotation grazing so the grass stays healthier. And even feeding animals agricultural byproducts otherwise destined for the landfill, like almond hulls, rice bran, rice straw.
Adaptation, it's what we do, and if you don't adapt, you don't make it.
For urban Canadians, the price of produce is the immediate impact of drought in California and sea level rise in Florida. But we'll soon be grappling with much bigger issues. Forget about the price of oranges. What about the millions around the world who won't have anything to eat?
You think Miami Beach has a problem? Bangladesh, they've got 60 million people sitting in deltas that are going to go underwater. All their rice fields are going underwater, where they get everything that they need to live will be underwater in Bangladesh. And what are we going to do there?
The situation is dire for much of the developing world.
They can't adapt. They have no resources to adapt. And they can't reduce their emissions because they're already trivial anyway. So where's our social sense of justice? Anyway, I'm getting emotional. Shouldn't do that. I'm a scientist, right?
There are enormous challenges ahead as we figure out how to accommodate the climate refugees of the not-so-distant future and deal with the inevitable political unrest.
We shouldn't sit here naively in Canada thinking with all these resources and only 33 million people filling it, that we're going to exist as some sort of ideal little island in the middle of the world that other people who are being displaced through significant negative effects, that they're not going to turn to us to expect to take some of what we have.
If there's a silver lining in all this wild weather, it might be that it's pushing us to finally face the reality of climate change.
Are we gonna have a team or?
Where's my ball?
For my kids, one of the key points I worry about is in the world they are inheriting. The climate has changed, is changing, will continue to change. We have to get on with adaptation immediately. Every day we don't act is a day we don't have.